Mrs. Amelia woke up with the sun already high, filtering through the faded curtain of her small, stuffy kitchen. The smell of brewed coffee, the only thing that warmed her heart on cold mornings, seemed weaker today. A widow for years, she carried on her shoulders not only the weight of age and labor, but also the burden of a loneliness that her daughter, Carla, with her distant and sometimes hostile presence, could never fill. Carla was her only daughter, the reason for her existence, but also the source of her greatest pain. Amelia had raised Carla with the sweat of her brow, with calloused fingers from sewing clothes for others, scrubbing other people's yards, ironing piles of clothes for the wealthy families in the neighborhood. She never had much, but she never complained. A modest life was all she knew, and she was content with the little she could provide. Her husband's death had been a devastating blow. Amelia thought fate had been too cruel, taking away her only safe harbor. But then there was Carla. Despite her difficult demeanor, her unexpected outbursts, and the harsh words that pierced like needles, Amelia wanted to be near her. She wanted to care, to help, to show that she could still be useful, even if she was now just an elderly woman with hands marked by time and a back bent from years of toil. However, Carla always made it clear, with every impatient glance, every exasperated sigh, that her mother's presence was a burden. "It's a weight," she would say indirectly, through her actions, her heavy silence. Still, Amelia endured. Her refuge, her ray of sunshine on grey days, was Samuel, her grandson. The boy, with his curious eyes and welcoming quietness, would sit beside her on the old rocking chair, listening to stories of a time long gone, laughing at the silly jokes only grandparents tell, accepting a piece of cake with the gratitude of someone receiving a treasure, and snuggling in her arms with an innocence that made her forget everything else. Samuel was the reason Amelia smiled, the reason she insisted on staying, even as Carla pushed her to the corners of the house, even as Sandro, her son-in-law, looked at her as if she were invisible, a stain on the wall unworthy of attention. She wanted to believe that deep down her presence was still necessary, that in some small way she made a difference. Mrs. Amelia's days followed a monotonous, almost inaudible rhythm. She was like a potted plant in the corner of a room, forgotten, ignored, but stubbornly alive, fulfilling its role there, until the day everything changed. The house was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the dense silence of someone pretending everything is fine, knowing that at any moment something could explode, that the accumulated tension could shatter into 1,000 pieces. Mrs. Amelia was in the kitchen, hunched over the stove, stirring a pot. The steam rose lightly, the smell of plain rice filling the room, a smell that for her was synonymous with home, with sustenance. Her wrinkled, steady hands stirred the spoon with an almost automatic care, as if it were the only thing she knew how to do in a world that seemed to have no place for her anymore. In the living room, Carla rolled her eyes impatiently, sitting on the couch, the light from her phone illuminating her face in constant discontent. She scrolled her fingers across the screen, oblivious to everything around her, as if the universe were confined to that small, glowing rectangle in her hands. Sandro, her husband, was sprawled on the couch, legs stretched over the coffee table, the television blaring too loudly. His face was a mask of exhaustion with life and everything it entailed. Samuel, the 11-year-old grandson, sat on the floor, a little apart, but with his big, curious eyes fixed on his grandmother. There was something in those eyes that even he couldn't explain, a mix of admiration and a latent sadness, as if he sensed what was to come. It was always like this. Mrs. Amelia cooked lunch, dinner, washed the dishes, folded the clothes scattered around the house, and no one said thank you. No one even looked her in the eyes. She knew she was there more as an inconvenience than as someone who belonged, a tolerated presence, but not wanted. Even so, it was the only place she wanted to be, the only place she still called home. Carla let out a loud sigh, a sound that echoed through the house like an irritated snap. "Mom, for God's sake, can you stop banging that spoon like that? That noise gets on my nerves." Her voice was sharp, cutting, slicing through the kitchen's silence like a blade. "Mrs." Amelia lowered her head, her face twisting into an expression of guilt, as if the simple sound of the spoon were indeed an unforgivable crime. "Sorry, daughter," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Carla didn't even let her finish. "All the time with that noise. Enough, Mom." Sandro snorted from the couch, not taking his eyes off the TV. "No way around it, Carla. Your mom's done all she had to give. She's more of a hindrance than a help." His words were a hammer, striking straight at Amelia's soul. She felt her face heat up, tears welling in her eyes. The words hurt more than any physical pain, as if each sentence were a knife being slowly pushed in, tearing not her skin, but her soul, the last shred of dignity she had left. She tried to keep busy, wiping the counter, straightening a crooked cloth, anything to divert attention from those cruel words. But the silence that followed was too heavy, dense, laden with contempt. Suddenly a sharp crack. The glass cup Mrs. Amelia was holding, which had slipped from her hands countless times before without breaking, now fell to the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound cut through the air like a shrill scream, a confirmation of her uselessness. Carla sprang from the couch like a coil, her eyes blazing with anger. "Again, Mom, for God's sake, you can't even hold a cup?" Samuel froze, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat, his small body trembling. "Mrs." Amelia tried to bend down to pick up the shards, but Carla advanced, yanking the cloth from her hand with force and shouting, as if yelling for the whole world to hear, for the truth to spread. "Enough! I can't take it anymore. You're nothing but trouble. It's time you understood. You're good for nothing." Sandro from behind muttered with disdain, not even glancing at the scene. "It's long overdue." Mrs. Amelia stopped. Her heart raced, but not from shock. It was from pain. Pain from shame, from a sadness that seemed heavier than her frail body could bear. She looked at Samuel, the boy's eyes welling with tears, his hands trembling, his mouth open in silent protest. He tried to run to his grandmother, but Carla grabbed his arm tightly. "No, Samuel, she's leaving now." Mrs. Amelia stood up slowly, as if carrying the weight of a lifetime of sacrifices. She said nothing, didn't scream, didn't beg. She simply took her purse, a small suitcase with some folded clothes, and looked at her daughter one last time. Her gaze held no anger, no resentment. It was a farewell from someone who knew that, from that moment on, something had changed forever. An invisible line had been drawn and there was no going back. She walked out the door slowly, feeling the cold night breeze touch her face, a chilling caress that contrasted with the fire burning in her soul. The street was deserted, the dim lights of the street lamps illuminating the sidewalk like distant eyes, silently watching her uncertain fate. And there, alone, Mrs. Amelia walked without knowing where to go, without knowing who still cared, who might take her in. But deep down, a certainty grew within her, strengthening her with each step. Life still had much to teach, but not to those who thought they knew everything, who disregarded the value of love and dignity. Mrs. Amelia walked slowly along the sidewalk. The weight of the suitcase, though light, hurt her tired shoulders, and her legs ached, a dull, constant pain that seemed to have settled into her bones. Her breath came short, panting, each inhalation an effort. The night was cold, a biting air that raised goosebumps on her arms and cracked her lips. The yellowish light of the street lamps cast long, distorted shadows on the wet asphalt, as if they were specters of her own loneliness accompanying her. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground wanted to pull her down, as if her entire life were whispering cruelly, "You have nowhere left to go." She thought about turning back, knocking on Carla's door, begging to stay, swallowing her pride and the harsh words, all for a roof over her head. But no, pride, or perhaps the unbearable pain of Carla and Sandro's words, kept her feet moving in the opposite direction. There was a limit to the humiliation a mother could endure. When the wind cut sharper, a cold gust that made her shrink, Mrs. Amelia stopped. There was a park bench in front of her, dark and worn wood, and she sat there, placing the suitcase beside her. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. Tears fell unhurriedly, wetting her wrinkled face, tracing salty trails. She looked at the dark sky, dotted with distant stars, searching for answers. A sign, anything to ease the tightness in her chest. "Mrs. Amelia, is that really you?" The voice came softly, surprised, filled with genuine care she hadn't felt in a long time. Amelia turned her face slowly, wiping tears with the back of her hand. It was Mrs. Dalva, the neighbor from across the street, carrying 2 heavy grocery bags. Dalva was a simple woman with an easy smile, grey hair tied in a messy bun. She always said good morning, offered a coffee when she saw her at the gate, but Amelia never thought she noticed her life so much, truly saw her. "What are you doing out here alone at this hour?" Dalva asked, her eyes narrowing with concern, her brow furrowed in perplexity at the scene. Amelia lowered her head, ashamed, unable to conjure a lie. I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion and cold. Dalva paused for a moment, the bags hanging from her hands as if trying to grasp the depth of pain that simple sentence carried. Then, without hesitation, she set the bags on the bench, sat beside Amelia, took her cold hands, and said in a firm tone that brooked no refusal, "You're coming to my house, whatever happened. You can't stay on the street. No way." Amelia tried to refuse, shaking her head weakly, but the words died in her throat. The exhaustion was greater than any reluctance. The loneliness weighed like a wet blanket, suffocating her. Mrs. Dalva took her friend's suitcase with one hand and with the other held her arm, guiding her. They walked together to Dalva's house, a simple little home with peeling walls and faded paint, but lit by a warm glow of affection emanating from within. Inside, the familiar smell of brewed coffee and cornbread mixed with the low sound of the television, a soap opera Dalva watched religiously every night. "Sit here, Mrs. Amelia. I'll make you some tea." Amelia sat slowly on the old, soft couch, her eyes still red, hands in her lap, feeling the warmth of the room seep into her chilled body. The living room was simple but cozy. There were old photos on the walls, framed with care, a rosary hanging by the door, and a worn but clean rug that gave an air of home, of comfort. Dalva brought steaming tea, sat beside her, and after a respectful, welcoming silence, asked softly, "What happened, my friend?" And there, under that dim yellow light, between sips of hot tea and broken sobs, Mrs. Amelia told everything. The words came slowly, interrupted by tears and the pain still pulsing in her chest. Carla's coldness, Sandro's cruel disdain, Samuel's interrupted embrace. Dalva listened without interrupting, only holding her friend's hand, squeezing it occasionally as if saying without words, "I'm here, I understand your pain." After a while, when the tears subsided and Amelia's voice grew steadier, she looked at Dalva and whispered, almost as if confessing an unspeakable sin, a lifelong secret, I saved money my whole life, Dalva. I didn't tell anyone, not even Carla. I just wanted to help one day, a day when I thought they really needed it." "Money?" Dalva asked, surprised, her eyes widening slightly. Amelia nodded, eyes down, voice hoarse. "Yes, a lot. $2 million. Dalva's eyes widened further, a mix of shock and disbelief, but she said nothing. She didn't ask how or why she had saved so much. She just looked at Amelia with a blend of admiration for her friend's strength and sadness for the situation she was in. She knew that money, that fortune, was worthless now, not to someone who had been cast out of her own home like an old, useless burden. Amelia took a deep breath, and for the first time that terrible night, a faint smile appeared on her lips, small, timid, but full of resolve, a new determination. "I know what I'm going to do with it, Dalva. I'm going to help those who deserve it, those who truly treated me with kindness, with respect." Dalva remained silent, respecting that decision, as if it were a sacred promise made in a moment of pure clarity. And together, the two simple women sitting on the worn couch in a humble home seemed to carry more strength than any hidden wealth in the world. That night, Mrs. Amelia slept in peace, a sleep she hadn't felt in a long time, because she knew life still had much to teach, and she was ready to leave her own lesson. The morning sun filtered through the slats of the simple living room window at Mrs. Dalva's house, painting the floor with golden light. Mrs. Amelia opened her eyes slowly, smelling fresh coffee from the kitchen, an aroma that brought comfort. For a moment, she thought it had all been a nightmare, that she would wake up in her own bed, with Carla grumbling in the background. But no, it was real. She was there, lying on a neighbor's couch, with a bag of clothes at her feet, without a home, without direction, without her daughter. Mrs. Dalva appeared at the door with a calm, welcoming smile, holding 2 steaming cups. "Good morning, Mrs. Amelia. Sleep well?" Amelia took a deep breath, sitting up slowly, feeling the aches in her back. "Better than I expected, Dalva. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." The two sat at the small, wobbly table. The coffee was simple, no luxury, but the warmth was like an embrace, more comforting than any fine drink. Dalva looked at her friend, her eyes curious but respectful. "You mentioned money yesterday. Is it really true?" Amelia gave a half smile, tired but serene. "Yes, Dalva, it's true. I saved every penny I could my whole life. I worked as a seamstress, a nanny, saved as much as I could. And years ago, I received an inheritance from my father, a considerable amount. I kept it all, and the money grew, accumulating interest. The inheritance and my savings, all together, it came to $2 million. I never told Carla, because I know who she really is. I know she only cares about what money can buy, not about people. Dalva's eyes widened again, absorbing the information, but she asked no more. It wasn't her money, and deep down, she knew it had been saved with care, not out of ambition or selfishness, but out of a love that was never recognized. Mrs. Amelia stayed a few more days at her neighbor's house. Dalva treated her like an older sister, cared for her with affection, offered hot meals, and helped however she could. Amelia, in turn, tried to repay with small gestures, washing dishes, sewing Dalva's torn clothes, making coffee for both, and little by little, the sadness and hurt gave way to gratitude. It was on a grey afternoon, with a fine drizzle that seemed to cleanse the soul, that Amelia made her final decision. She was sitting in the small living room, watching Dalva sew a torn blouse with simple dedication, and something inside her sparked. "Dalva," Amelia began, her voice firm and resolute, "I want to help you. You and your husband, Mr. Juon, have always treated me with dignity, with a kindness I haven't seen in years. I'm going to give you a good amount of money to renovate this house, to make it the way you've always dreamed, and also to buy medicine for Mr. Juon so he doesn't suffer anymore, and to pay all the bills that weigh on you." Dalva tried to refuse, shaking her head, her eyes welling with tears. "No, Mrs. Amelia, no way. You've already done so much for me just by being here." But Amelia held her hand firmly, a gesture of unwavering conviction. "It's not charity, Dalva. It's recognition. It's my way of thanking you for taking me in when I had no one else. It's my way of showing that kindness, goodness are the greatest riches anyone can have." Dalva cried silently, squeezing her friend's hand with gratitude, and in that moment, Amelia smiled. A smile from the soul, and something inside her was set free. The pain of being rejected by her daughter still lingered, a distant echo, but now there was a greater purpose, a light guiding her steps. Sometime later, Amelia moved to a nursing home. It was a simple but welcoming place, where the caregivers called her by name with genuine respect and affection, where the elderly chatted like old friends, sharing stories and laughter. The smell of fresh coffee and cornbread filled the corridors, creating a homely atmosphere she hadn't felt in a long time. Amelia felt at peace for the first time in years. She didn't feel like she was in anyone's way, a burden. She sat in the garden, felt the gentle breeze on her face, watched the birds in the sky, and there, in silence, she knew this was the right place to start over. One afternoon, while having tea in the common room, she called the nursing home's administrator, a young, dedicated woman. "Miss, I want to make a donation to this place." The woman was surprised, her eyes widening. "Mrs. Amelia, that's not necessary. You already pay for your stay, and very well, we don't need anything." But Amelia smiled, her voice calm and firm. "I want to help. This place is special. You take good care of people. Take good care of it too." And so, quietly, without seeking recognition, Mrs. Amelia made a generous donation. No one knew the exact amount, but the nursing home was never the same. The walls were painted vibrant colors, the rooms became cozier, filled with small comforts, and the faces of the elderly, once dulled by time and melancholy, now smiled with new brightness, new hope. But Amelia didn't forget Samuel. That same week, he showed up at the nursing home unexpectedly, holding a drawing, his eyes shining. "Grandma, I drew you in the garden with the flowers. Look." Amelia looked at the paper, a simple drawing but full of love, and tears welled up unbidden. She hugged her grandson tightly, as if the whole world fit in that embrace. And in that moment, she made the most important decision of her life. She sat Samuel down in front of her, held his small hands, and said with a seriousness the boy had never seen before, "Samuel, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. I saved some money, my boy, money that's for you." Samuel's eyes widened, his mouth slightly open, not fully understanding what his grandmother was saying. "You'll only be able to use this money when you turn 18, my boy. Until then, it'll stay saved, growing, waiting for you." The boy tried to ask more, but she squeezed his hand gently. "I want you to grow up knowing what respect is, Samuel. I want you to never let money be more important than people." This money, it's worth nothing if you don't know how to be a good man, a man with heart who values people. Samuel nodded, his eyes shining, his heart beating fast. He didn't understand everything, but he knew one thing. His grandmother was the strongest, most generous woman he'd ever known. And in that simple garden, amidst the scent of flowers and the song of birds, Mrs. Amelia smiled because deep down she knew. True wealth wasn't in the money, it was in the love and the legacy of dignity she left behind. The news spread like a sharp whisper, rippling through the neighborhood's corners. Did you know? Mrs. Amelia, Carla's mother, made a huge donation to the nursing home. They say it was a lot of money, enough to leave anyone's jaw on the floor. Carla heard the whispers for the first time at the market while picking fruit. A woman commented quietly to another, not noticing Carla was nearby. Yeah, hidden money no one suspected, right? Carla's blood ran cold. Her heart raced suddenly, as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. She turned slowly, trying to hide it, but her thoughts swirled like a hurricane in her mind. Donation, a lot of money, but my mother never had anything. How? The walk back home was a blur of jumbled memories. The times she saw her mother counting coins to buy bread, the old clothes, the worn-out shoes, the faded purse her mother carried for years, and suddenly everything seemed strange, out of place. Had she been hiding something all this time? Carla couldn't focus. Sandro saw her distress, asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer, her mind a whirlwind. Samuel, in the corner of the room, drew quietly, his gaze attentive to his mother, as if he knew more than he let on. That night, Carla didn't sleep. She tossed and turned, eyes wide in the dark, questions without answers tormenting her. The next day, she rose determined. I'm going to that nursing home. I need to understand what's going on. The morning sun lit the streets as Carla arrived at the nursing home's entrance. It was a simple but welcoming place. There were colorful flowers in the garden, some elderly women chatting under a tree's shade, and a soft sound of classical music echoing through the halls. Carla felt small there, a stranger in a place of peace, but she took a deep breath and entered. At the reception, she asked for her mother. The attendant smiled politely. Mrs. Amelia is in the garden reading, ma'am. Carla followed the corridor, the sound of her own footsteps echoing like a drum in her ears. Outside, she saw her mother sitting on a bench, a book in her lap, glasses perched on the tip of her nose. Her white hair gleamed in the sunlight, and her face looked calm, serene, more peaceful than Carla had ever seen in her entire life. Mum? Carla's voice came out softer than she expected, almost a whisper. Amelia looked up slowly, her gaze calm but firm, without rancor, but with a certainty that disarmed her. Carla tried to control her breathing, but anger, indignation, and nervousness exploded in her chest, mixed with a strange sense of shame. I heard things about you, about money, about donations. Amelia closed the book calmly, adjusted her glasses, and replied in a soft voice but laden with undeniable truth. Yes, daughter. I used what I had to help those who treated me with respect, who gave me kindness and dignity. Carla's eyes widened, unable to hide her indignation and fury. What do you mean, Mom? You had money all this time and never said anything, never helped us? Amelia took a deep breath, as if she knew this conversation had come too late, that the bridges had been burned. I tried to help, Carla. I tried to give what I could, my time, my love, my care, but you never wanted that. You always wanted what money could buy, not what love could give. Carla crossed her arms, her face red, her pride wounded to the core. That's not fair, Mom. That money belongs to the family. I have a right to it. Amelia looked up, and this time her gaze was sharp, cutting like a well-sharpened knife. What belongs to the family is respect, Carla, and that you lost the right to have. Silence fell like a weight between them. Carla opened her mouth to speak, to plead, to try to justify herself, but the words died in her throat. She tried to force a smile, to say it was just a misunderstanding, but Amelia merely shook her head as if saying, No need to pretend. I already know. There's nothing more to say. I left everything to Samuel, Amelia added, her voice low but firm as stone. He'll be able to use it when he turns 18. Until then, he'll learn what it means to be a real man with character. Samuel, watching from a distance, approached slowly, his small steps almost inaudible on the grass. He stood beside his grandmother, took her wrinkled hand with affection and squeezed it. Carla looked at her son, her face flushed, her chest heaving with anger and humiliation, but he said nothing, just stood there, holding his grandmother's hand. His eyes full of a shine Carla couldn't understand, a shine of admiration and pure love. Mrs. Amelia took a deep breath, looked at the sky, and let a faint smile escape. The breeze stirred her white hair, and in that moment she seemed free, a bird that had finally found its way out of the cage. Carla turned, leaving almost stumbling over her own steps, her face burning with shame, her chest tight with useless anger. The garden behind her grew small, distant, as the weight of regret began to settle in her soul, like an echo she knew wouldn't fade anytime soon. The nursing home's garden was simple but beautiful. There were colorful flowers growing in small beds, an old swing creaking gently in the wind, and wooden benches where residents could sit to feel the sun on their faces. Mrs. Amelia was sitting on one of those benches, her hands resting in her lap, her serene gaze watching the blue sky. Beside her, Samuel, legs swinging back and forth, held a sketchbook. They stayed like that for long, quiet minutes, as if the silence between them was more valuable than any conversation. Until Samuel, with a child's typical curiosity, broke the silence. "Grandma, why did you give so much money to the people here?" Amelia turned her face slowly, looked at her grandson with tenderness, and answered calmly, "Because they gave me something no money can buy, my boy. Respect. They looked me in the eyes, Samuel. They treated me like a person, not a burden, not a nuisance. They truly saw me." Samuel thought for a few seconds, digesting his grandmother's words, then spoke softly, "And the rest of the money? Are you going to leave it to Mom?" Amelia took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, as if reliving past hurts, and then looked at him with a sad but firm smile. "No, my boy, the money will be yours, but only when you're of age, and I don't want you to forget everything I've taught you." Samuel's eyes widened, his mouth slightly open. "Mine?" Amelia nodded. "Yes, Samuel. But you need to understand something. Money is just paper. What really matters is what we do with it. I want you to grow up knowing that the greatest legacy someone can leave isn't money. It's how you treat those who love you, how you treat the people around you. It's your dignity and your humanity." Samuel fell silent, absorbing those words, the weight of a responsibility he didn't fully understand yet. The wind rustled the tree leaves, the sun warmed their faces, and the distant sound of other elderly residents' laughter completed the peaceful scene. Amelia took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, felt her chest light. She thought of Carla, her daughter's fury, the harsh words, the humiliations. For a moment, the pain tried to return, but she pushed the thought away. Carla had made her choices, and she, Amelia, had made hers. "Grandma," Samuel said suddenly, interrupting her thoughts, "I promise I'll never treat you badly and I'll never forget you." Amelia smiled, touched, a tear escaping her tired eyes, but she let it fall, a tear of joy and gratitude. She stroked her grandson's hair and said softly, "I know, my boy, I know you won't, and that's already the greatest wealth a grandmother could have." That night, Carla sat alone on her bed, her gaze lost in the darkness of the room. Her mother's words echoed in her mind like a sentence she couldn't erase. She thought of everything. The day she kicked her mother out, the way she treated her, the missed opportunities, the son who now seemed more distant, more attached to his grandmother than to her. Regret suffocated her, a bitter wave swallowing her, but now it was too late. At the nursing home, Amelia's routine continued, simple and peaceful. She spent her days helping other residents, telling old stories, teaching how to sew small crafts. She was respected there, treated with affection, with a dignity she thought she had lost, and that, for her, was worth more than any fortune. When people asked why she helped so much, she answered with a calm smile and a look of someone who saw the world differently. Because life is lighter when we learn to value what really matters: love, respect, kindness. Months later, on Samuel's birthday, Amelia organized a small party in the nursing home's garden. There was simple but delicious cake, colorful cups, balloons hanging from the trees, and an atmosphere of pure joy. Samuel arrived with a tight hug, and Amelia received him as if he were the greatest gift in the world. "Happy birthday, my boy, you're growing up. Always remember what I told you. We don't measure a person by the money they have. We measure them by the respect they give others, by the kindness they cultivate in their heart." Samuel nodded, smiling, and in that moment he seemed to understand everything. More than understand, he seemed to feel it. One day, Amelia was sitting alone in the garden at dusk. The sky was painted orange and purple, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. A soft breeze stirred her white hair, and she thought with a light and peaceful heart, life teaches those who despise the simple. One day they discover too late that they lost what was most valuable. And with that thought, Mrs. Amelia carried on in peace, knowing that her story, her courage, and her dignity would be remembered not for the money she left behind, but for the love and respect she taught others to cultivate. Mrs. Amelia left a lesson that echoes forever. Time waits for no one, because when you choose to humiliate someone who only loved you, it may be too late to ask for forgiveness. Life teaches, and one day, everyone learns. So, what did you think of this story? Have you ever stopped to consider how many times we dismiss someone without knowing what they carry inside, the hidden riches in their soul?